At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like this. Once there was a man who was about to leave home on a trip. He called his servants and put them in charge of his property. He gave to each one according to his ability. To one he gave 5,000 gold coins, and to another he gave 2,000, and to another he gave 1,000. Then he left on his trip. The servant who had received 5,000 coins went at once and invested his money and earned another 5,000. In the same way, the servant who had received 2,000 coins earned another 2,000. The servant who had received 1,000 coins went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants came back and settled accounts with them. The servant who had received 5,000 coins came in and handed over the other 5,000. You gave me 5,000 coins, sir, he said. Look, here are another 5,000 that I have earned. Well done, you good and faithful servant, said his master. You have been faithful in managing small amounts, so I will put you in charge of large amounts. Come on in and share my happiness. 2,000 coins, sir. Look, here are the other 2,000 that I have earned. Well done, you good and faithful servant, said his master. You have been faithful in managing small amounts, so I will put you in charge of large amounts. Come on in and share my happiness. Then the servant who had received 1,000 coins came in and said, Sir, I know you are a hard man. You reap harvests where you did not plant, and you gather crops where you did not scatter seed. I was afraid, so I went off and hid your money in the ground. Look, here is what belongs to you. You bad and lazy servant, his master said. You knew, did you, that I reap harvests where I did not plant and gather crops where I did not scatter seed? Well then, you should have deposited my money in the bank, and I would have received it all back with interest when I returned. Now take the money away from him and give it to the one who has 10,000 coins. For to every person who has something, even more will be given, and he will have more than enough. But the person who has nothing, even the little that he has, will be taken away from him. As for this useless servant, throw him outside in the darkness. There he will cry and gnash his teeth. The parable of the three servants. Part of me thinks I should talk to an investment broker in order to understand it. Maybe I should be asking the broker what I would have to do and what risks I would have to take in order to double my money. In all probability, the broker will tell me about the rule of 72, which of course I'd never heard of before last week. The rule of 72 goes like this. If your investment has a guaranteed interest rate of 5%, you divide that rate into 72. And the answer will be the number of years it will take to double your money. So, if my math is correct, 5 into 72 equals roughly 14 and a half years. At an interest rate of 5%, it will take almost 14 and a half years to double my money. Of course, if you want to double your money more quickly, you'll have to take more risk. In the world of venture capital, for example, only 1 out of 4 or 5, some say 1 out of 10, makes it. The others lose everything. Now, Jesus tells his parable of the 3 servants in the middle of his own high-risk venture. He tells the story during the last few days of his life, after he has already left the safety of Galilee, risking everything to go to Jerusalem. There, as we know, the religious authorities will see him as a threat to the status quo and to their power. The Romans will see him as a troublemaker and a disturber of the peace. The parable Jesus tells is about a wealthy man who goes away on a long journey. And before he leaves, he gives each of his 3 servants a certain amount of money. The first servant takes his money to market, to the investment broker, you might say. And he invests in high-risk ventures. The second servant does the same thing. He puts his money to work at high risk. And both servants do extremely well. Both reap high rewards beyond even the rule of 72. When their master returns, he's very pleased. Well done, the master says, and promises them more responsibility in the future. The third servant does something quite different with his 1,000 coins. He buries them in the ground for safekeeping. Now, in times of huge economic growth, you might think that the third servant was foolish for doing this. But in times of stock market decline, wouldn't you think he looks very wise? He's not a bad man, this third servant. To the contrary, he's a prudent, careful, cautious investor. He's not about to take chances with his master's money. Every penny of it is there when his master returns. And the servant is proud of himself. Here it is, he says to his master. All is safe and sound. And yet, for his efforts, he is treated as harshly as anyone in the Bible. I can't help but wonder how it would have turned out if the first 2 servants had put their master's money into a high-risk venture and lost it all. Had they, say, invested with Lehman Brothers just before the Wall Street crash in 2008. Now, Jesus, of course, did not tell the story that way. But I imagine the story's master would not have praised those 2 servants had that been the case. In that situation, I think the master would only have praised the third servant for burying his coins and not losing them. But of course, the point of the parable is not about doubling your money or accumulating more and more wealth. Rather, the point of the parable is about living. It's about investing wildly in all those things that give us life. It's about taking risks on behalf of others. It's about Jesus himself and what he has done. and what is about to happen to him. Mostly the parable is about what Jesus hopes and expects of his disciples after he is gone. It's about being a follower of Jesus and what it means to be faithful to him. And so finally, it's about you and me. The point of the parable is about you and me living out our Christian calling. It's about you and me finding the beauty and the joy that exists all around us in God's good creation. It's about you and me discovering what it means to live life abundantly, and then helping others to make that discovery too. And when we are with others who have perhaps lost their spark, who can no longer imagine what living life abundantly even looks like, it's about you and me trying as best we can, even risking failure, to help these people catch sight of the beauty and the joy in life that they've long been missing. And if sometimes, despite all our best efforts, despite all we have tried to do to improve their lives, these people, if they refuse to see the beauty, choosing instead to remain stuck in the quicksand of their own personal hell, then sadly, it's about you and me knowing when it is time to walk away. There's a series of books by C.S. Lewis that illustrates this point beautifully, I think. Near the end of his Chronicles of Narnia, Aslan the lion takes Lucy, Edmund, Peter, and everyone to the new Narnia, to what we would call heaven or the new creation. It's a place of astonishing light and beauty. A place where every blade of grass seems to mean more. And where every creature sings for the sheer joy of the Creator. It's a place where everything is just so real in depth and color that the mere sight of a daisy takes your breath away and makes you weep for the sheer beauty of the thing. But then in the midst of all this splendor, the children see a group of dwarves huddled together, convinced that they are sitting in the rank stench of a barn, a place so dark that they cannot see their hands in front of their faces. Lucy is so upset that the dwarves are not enjoying the new Narnia that she begs Aslan to help them see. Aslan replies, "Dearest Lucy, I will show you what I can do and what I cannot do." Aslan then shakes his golden mane, and a sumptuous banquet instantly appears. Each dwarf is given a plate heaped with juicy meats, glistening vegetables, plump grains of rice. And each also receives a goblet brimming with the finest wine anyone could ever imagine. And when the dwarves dive in and begin eating, they start gagging and complaining. "Doesn't this beat all?" they lament. "Not only are we in this stinking stable, But now we've got to eat hay and dried cow dung as well. When they sip the wine, they sputter. And look at this now. Dirty water out of a donkey's trough. The dwarves, Aslan goes on to say, had chosen suspicion instead of trust and love. They were prisoners of their own minds. They could not see Aslan's gift of the new Narnia, for they would not see it. And Aslan could do nothing else but leave them alone to the hell of their own devising. So I ask you, might something similar be going on with the third servant in our parable? Can it be that he just cannot see the goodness of his master? And he's choosing instead to fear him? Has the third servant chosen suspicion and doubt instead of trust and love? Safety and security instead of courage and risk? Indifference instead of care and concern? Darkness instead of light? Meager life instead of abundant life? Hell instead of heaven? You see, the greatest risk of all, as it turns out, is not to risk anything. Not to care deeply enough about anything. Not to invest deeply in anything. Not to give your heart away to something. And in the process, risk everything. The greatest risk of all, as it turns out, is to play it safe. To live over cautiously and over prudently. The greatest risk of all is to live not caring, not loving, not rejoicing, not living up to the full potential of our humanity. Playing it safe, investing nothing of ourselves. Being overly cautious and prudent, digging a hole and burying God's treasure in the ground. And Jesus warns that the outcome of living this way is akin to death. It's like being banished to the outer darkness. Jesus invites us to be his disciples, to live our lives as fully as possible by investing our lives in others, by risking, by taking more responsibility for others. To be his man or woman, he says, is not so much believing ideas about him as it is following him. It's about being bold and brave. It's about reaching high and caring deeply. The parable is an invitation to an adventure of faith. The high-risk venture of being a true disciple of Jesus Christ. And through this parable, now that we've heard it, we're asked to respond. And one way or another, we will. By the way we act, by the way we love, by the way we care. So choose well, my friends. Right? Let us all choose well. Amen.